Hi.
Hello. I just started streaming, so you're
Yeah.
you can already wave, but I don't think anyone joined. So I usually start a bit earlier. Uh, I need 1 second. So when I usually start the stream, and now what I do is I share the link everywhere. So I need a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So be silent for a bit. So you have a nice microphone.
Thanks.
Your special microphone for podcasts and doing talks.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying it for the first time, actually.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it's good done.
Yeah, it's you have a studio or it's like a co-working or
No, it's the office.
it's office. Okay. Have is it what is it? Bananas?
Yeah, it's a bananas meeting room. We
Okay.
call it like that.
You already do you have to go to the office or it's those who want to go?
It's not necessary, but I go sometimes when it's too hot because I don't have a air conditioner in my room at home. So when it's hot, I usually go to the office.
Is it hot? You're in Kiev right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it hot in Kiev?
Yeah, it's getting like 25 degrees again, something like that. Like it was a bit chilly in the beginning of like this week and last week as well, but like these days it's getting hotter again.
Yeah, maybe last warm days of the year.
Yeah, I guess.
So today in Berlin it was very hot, but 3 hours ago it just started very dark. So now it's super dark. I have lights on now, and it's raining. And I hope it wasn't the last warm day today. Yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask you a bit. So you, this woman who code community, and so it says that you're a lead mentor and mentor there. This local branch, is it a Kiev branch or a branch in Ukraine?
Yeah, it's basically Kiev branch, but it's not like we have women who code in other cities. We have like branch in Vinnytsia, but it's not really active like for the last couple of years or so. Like it was the first, weirdly, it was the first branch in Ukraine, but they don't really do much these days. So like basically everything that's active in Ukraine in Women Who Code, it's happening in Kiev.
Do you usually have like in-person meetups or online?
Usually we had in-person meetups, but after quarantine and stuff, we moved to offline. And also there is kind of a general policy for all the communities, and we got this information that it's too early for now to go in person. So for now we're just doing all that online till they allow us not to.
Ah, so basically, even if you want, now you cannot because it's forbidden to meet.
Yeah, basically because it's like forbidden in US and the main office is based there.
Ah, okay.
So
So
yeah,
it's not that in Kiev or in Ukraine it's forbidden. It's the whole organization, like it's
yeah.
organization-wide policy. I see. Okay.
But I think not so many communities are doing offline events yet. Like still a lot of communities are
Mhm.
doing that online, probably because it's a bit more convenient, I would say.
Yeah, I cannot imagine how is it to organize an offline event. Like with online, it's easy. You just you need to find a speaker. You need to uh, you know get a Zoom
Yeah,
and then find a way how you distribute that, and that's it. Like with and with offline, it's so much more difficult. Like I cannot even imagine how is it
yeah, yeah.
to organize
I've
offline events.
I've been organizing offline events and there were like more complications are related to the venue and you have to like have all the stuff you need like microphones and etc have to check all the time, like all these laptops, and if the slides are sharing stuff. Also, like limitations of participants, like you have to check that as well, like registration. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff. So I like that, like online you can, like just basically one person can organize an event, but if it's offline, it's always a team.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like. I usually organize all this stuff alone, and I cannot imagine like getting like first finding where to like a venue, like you
Yeah.
said, like finding sponsors, and for every event you need to find a place. That's probably very difficult. For how long have you been doing this?
I think for the last 5 years, yeah.
Mm, that's great. So you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Did you start the local chapter or you didn't start?
Yeah, I was like in the beginning, and the first director of in Gold, I was like working with her. She's now not in the Kiev branch, and like because of her own like personal issues. But when she just started it all out, I was basically like one of the first people who organized the first event. So yeah, it's interesting to see how everything develops all the time.
That's so cool. Oh, by the way, usually what I do is I take a picture and then put this on Twitter, and I forgot to do this.
Okay.
Like I'll do this now. If you want, you can smile. Okay, you don't have to, but so let me just quickly share it. I know that I'm supposed to start right now, but I want to first put it on Twitter. I was very interested, like our discussion was very interesting, so I lost track of time.
Yeah,
Okay,
that happens.
okay, I have tweeted, and now what I'll do, I think it's time to start, 2 minutes ago probably. So let me share my screen. Oh, you can see yourself, but there's some delay between us
Yeah.
and the stream. So hi everyone. Um, so let me start. Hello everyone. Um, this event is brought to you by Data Talks Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, so this event is one of such events. On Fridays, we usually have live interviews, podcasts, and then on Tuesdays, we have webinars. There is a link in the description where you can find out more about the events that we have. So just go there, click on this. And if you like our events, you can also subscribe to our Google Calendar, and you will get a notification about every event that we have. So there is also a link to the calendar is in on our events page. And then there is this big subscribe button under this video window. So click on this, you'll get subscribed to our channel, and you will receive notifications about our new videos, and then join our Slack. We have awesome discussions about different data topics, so check it out. And then finally, if you have any questions during today's conversation, you can ask them in Slido. So there is a pinned link in the live chat. So click on this, ask any question you want, and we will cover these questions during today's interview. So that's all from me. So now I just need to get my notes. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, this week we'll talk about starting with data science in a startup, and we have a special guest today, Marianna. Marianna is a data scientist at hi, is a data scientist at Restream and a data science lead and mentor in the local branch of Women Who Code community in Kiev. Before Restream, she worked at DataRobot, and she also led a data science team in a fintech startup. Welcome.
Thanks.
Before we go into our main topic, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was like super straightforward, as it probably happens with some of the data scientists, because basically you usually have like just two ways. You're coming from a research background or from software development background, and basically I used to be a Java developer. I just got interested in the field, and thanks to the Women Who Code community, I also met real data scientists who are doing like work in production. And like back then, 5 years ago, it wasn't that popular. Maybe it wasn't that easy to find such people, and it really helped me to find a mentor, and that's how I started to study a lot. And then when I got my first job in a startup, I will probably be like referencing that a bit, because this is basically the place where I had the experience of leading a team. And also after that, I worked in data robots, which kind of allowed me to compare what it's like to work in a small startup in comparison to working in a more, I would say, closer to enterprise kind of company. And right now in Restream, also it's a startup as well, and I kind of have all the experience that I got like over the years, and I'm trying to apply it here right now.
Okay, so well, when did you switch to data science? Was it 5 years ago?
Yeah,
So this is when you joined the Women Who Code branch.
yeah,
Okay, it was at the same time.
yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
And were you the first data scientist at your first startup?
No, there are several data scientists, and it was like fintech startup, and I was lucky with that because I had kind of more experience and had reviews and stuff. But unfortunately, it didn't last long. That a lot of things changed in the company, and like it changed also in careers and lives of my former colleagues. So I think after less than a year, I was the only one data scientist, and that's how I got into trying to organize everything myself, and trying to hire a team, which was interesting since I didn't really had like that much experience. I mean, technical experience, but I was like the only person who knew product that well. Like even if we got and hired someone else, this person didn't know that much like the domain of the company. So it was really challenging, but it gave me quite a lot in terms of experience.
Okay, I got a comment that I'm kind of quiet, so I hope now it's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. So what are the pros and cons of starting as the first data scientist at the company?
I would say it's a bit subjective, probably for me. But maybe the best thing is having freedom in terms of what you can do. Like you don't have limitations. You're not limited by technologies you use. You're not limited by methodologies. And for example, in Data Robot, there is like really strict guidelines and process which I used for the projects in comparison to startups, where you can basically come up with some idea, you can implement it like really fast and control its execution. So it doesn't really take you that much time to go through all that, as it happens in some of the big companies when you need to get all the needed approvals and stuff. Also, you kind of have more influence, I guess, in terms of use again, like, I mean, like, people listen to your opinion more, I guess. So if you're working in a big company, there is a lot of data scientists and you are working on some specific projects probably, but when you're the only one, you're basically responsible for everything related to data science in the company till you hire a bigger team. Also, it seems to me if a startup has a healthy culture, that deadlines can be more realistic, because you kind of set them yourself, and of course you like discuss it with your colleagues, but still it's not like you have this strict process, and you're not pressured in terms of that. Although I still think that in terms of like disadvantages, you kind of have more responsibility than you have when you work in a team, because can be responsible basically not just for your model, but for everything happening in the company. Like in the first startup where I worked, I was basically responsible like for everything related to analytics, even like if it was dashboards, helping with some queries to other teams and stuff. So it's quite a lot of it's a huge load, I would say. And because of that, you have to learn a lot on the way because again, you don't have anyone near you who you can just ask. And I would say it's both good and bad. Bad in a way that you have to like you have this pressure that you need to learn a lot, and you have to somehow validate yourself if it's if you are doing the right thing. And at the same time, if you have someone to ask, sometimes you kind of can get unmotivated maybe to learn stuff. At least that's where I noticed how it works for me, that I kind of develop faster as a professional when I have like less support, I would say, from my colleagues. I don't know how it works, but sometimes when you kind of feel that you have someone to ask something, you kind of rely more on that and on yourself and on learning stuff by yourself.
So basically, it forces you to learn more than you would otherwise learn with your colleagues. That's interesting.
Somehow.
Yeah, I actually observed something similar when I worked at a startup. Even though I had data scientist colleagues who worked as data scientists, I think like because this lack of when there's a small team compared to a bigger team, then it kind of forces you to really do a lot of stuff that otherwise you maybe wouldn't do. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And,
You basically like let's focus on just one specific project, and you don't think like, oh, okay, I will learn that later, and I will just ask this person how to do that because I need to do that faster for like some plans for the team and deadlines and stuff. And as it usually happens, sometimes we just never get to that to learn that ourselves.
Yeah, if somebody wants to join a company, so this company doesn't have any data scientists yet, and you want to join a company as a only data scientist, what company should already have for that? Like what kind of things they should have for you to feel comfortable in this joining a startup? Like, are there any prerequisites, or you can just go to any startup and start working as a data scientist?
I would say that it would be great if company has some kind of existing pipelines and infrastructure and people who are like supporting that. Either it's data engineers, DevOps, developers, just depends on the company policies and stuff about that. But like I've had experience with like in Restream, there is already established infrastructure and people who do analytics and stuff. While in comparison to that, in the first startup where I worked, like there was basically nothing, and there was some data gathered, but sometimes it was like some bugs, and you couldn't use this data, and because of that, it was like really complicated. Because it seemed like you had a lot of data, but you actually didn't because you couldn't use all of that. And that's why I would say that's pretty much important. Also, again, compared to Restream, probably having some kind of analytics department, because as I mentioned, like at my first job in a startup, there was like no one doing analytics before me. And when you have like a huge scope of stuff you can do with data science, and plus you have a lot of stuff that you can do with analytics, helping different teams and stuff. It's like it's too much for one person for sure, and usually all of these things are high priority, so it can be hard to do all that at the same time.
So basically, companies should ideally have data engineers with data pipelines and then analysts, because otherwise, if they don't have them, you as a data scientist might end up doing all this work in addition to trying to do data science, but without having without the data, you probably cannot really do data science. So you'll need first spend a lot of time on building all these things, right?
Yeah.
And how much experience would I need to have to start to join a company as a only data scientist? Do I need to be very experienced, like I don't know, senior person, or if I'm just switching career, would it be a good idea to join such a company?
Yeah. I think it should be more like middle senior level, but the most important, at least for me, is being able to create a project from scratch and go through all the needed phases, like not just model training, but you should be able to define a problem if you don't have enough data to somehow translate what other people mean when you talk with people who don't really know data science. And also, you probably should be able to deploy a model and monitor it. So basically, it's like a huge scope, I would say, and not everyone has this kind of experience because sometimes you just get to work on one specific stage. So I would say experience with that, or at least the motivation to do that and to do a lot by yourself. It's something that should a data scientist should have.
So even though there are data engineers, even though there are analysts already in the company, you still need to do a lot of, you said, communication, like working with others to define a problem, then actually training a model, and then after that also being able to deploy it, like do the whole thing from the beginning till end, right?
Yeah, I would say it's like it always starts from defining if there is actually a problem that needs solving, because people usually they don't really exist in this context of the data science problems, and they have like very different understanding of how the field works and what we can do with the tools that we have. So basically, it's always about identifying whether there is a model needed, or maybe it shouldn't be solved, or maybe another problem needs more attention.
How do you do that?
I would say it takes experience, but at first, although I'm an introverted person, it was hard for me to learn not to be like that. But it takes really a lot of communication, especially with people who are close to the business side of the product. If it's, for example, analytics department, it's really helpful because usually analysts know quite a lot about different parts of the product, and they already kind of help uh, different teams, so they know more about that than going around all the company. But usually I try to communicate with all the departments, because sometimes even, especially when you don't have data scientist colleagues, all you have is like different people with different backgrounds, and when you hear their experiences and their challenges, I kind of automatically just translate it into the language of data science and try to understand how their problems can be solved.
How does it usually happen? Do others come to you with their problems, or you need to practically find problems that can be solved with data science?
I would say it depends on the company, because usually when the first data scientist is hired, there is already some understanding that he or she is supposed to solve some problem, or sometimes it's more like we have a lot of data and maybe we should do something with that, but we don't know if we should. So yeah, it depends on the company. But when I started, like in Restream, for example, I had like more specific requests, and I had like several ideas to explore, which is what is having like more priority, what is more feasible. And that's basically how I started working. And at first, it's like important to kind of talk more about what you can do, because people can't just come to you if they don't know what you're doing and how you can be helpful. So at first, it's more like a proactive reaching out to other people, and that's what basically I did. Like I organized different meetings with all the departments and talked about their challenges and problems, and try to explain how I can be helpful. And now it's more like people come to me and I'm like trying practically to do something. But I also try always to kind of think about some kind of a roadmap or a plan and discuss it as well with other people if they think that would be helpful or not. But I think it's also important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I can imagine if you talk to many people from different departments, from different teams, maybe all of them have problems, or half of them they have problems, and then you have a problem that you have too many problems to solve. So that's why you need a roadmap, right? So you need to be able to identify, okay, out of these 10 problems, what is the most impactful one, or what is the easiest to solve, right?
Yeah. I basically evaluate like feasibility, priority, also discuss it for like people who are my supervisors, what do they think, and that's how I basically decide what is more important.
Mm-hmm. So you just ask, hey, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how important it is, or like how do you understand what is more important and what is less?
It's more like I discuss it, for example, with I'm basically part of business analytics department, and I just ask the lead of this department what they think is like more important right now, and he's like always in touch with all these people as well. So and he's like working in the company for many years already, so I can chat with him or with some like other like head of product and people like that and hear different opinions. So that's how I decide that something is having more priority right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for you, I'm not sure I got that part. So when you were joining the stream, did you already know what kind of problems you would be working on, or you had to figure that out on your job?
I already kind of had a vague understanding what it could be, and at first I thought that it could be like one thing, but then we switched a little to another. So I'm also like doing for like work for marketing right now, and also some of the problems which we like discussed in the beginning, they turned out to be not so important right now, so they moved to something else. And I would say that um, they kind of had a request, but it got more clear over time when I joined the team.
So basically, a company should already have an idea that they have some problem that potentially can be solved with data science, right? And not like, okay, we have this, I don't know, 10 terabytes of data or 10 petabytes of data. Now we need to figure out what to do with all this information, right? So there should be something more or less, not super specific, but at least some idea. Okay, like we have this problem. It could be solved with data science, right? So
yeah, I also think that even if company doesn't really know what they want to solve, they can have, I don't know, some kind of a consulting before that, because it's not like we all live in this context of data analysis and we know what we can do with that. So it's completely fine not to know, but like both hiring and not knowing and also expecting a lot. Like I met such companies when they kind of see data science as a, I don't know, magic pill, which will be able to solve everything that's happening right now in the company. But it's more like a part of the one big process and changes.
So it's basically an ideal situation when a company already had consultants who explained them what could be done, what could not be done, and that potentially for this problem, data science is a good solution and they should hire data scientists, right? And then this is probably a good situation, right? Because company already has some processes. They have some ideas, even though maybe vague ideas, what could be done with data science, and then that's probably the ideal case, right? And when they already have some data pipelines and an analytical department, it's probably the best place for only data scientists, right, to start.
Yeah, and I also think that data science is basically it's like not the first step and not the first thing that you should do. Like that's why I said that analytics department is necessary before that, because usually for people, they think that they need some like automated pipelines for models and stuff, but sometimes they just need some dashboards and more simple analytics. So it's more like more an advanced step that you get over time. So that's why it kind of matters. And you're muted right now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, so let's say you joined the company, so you had an interview with them, you really like them, so they have the data pipelines, they have an analytical department, they seem to know what they want, so you think it's cool, you join this company, and what usually happens after that? So let's say on your first day.
I would say the first thing that I usually do is that I try to discuss as much as possible with different people. What do they expect from me, and how do they see my work? So basically, I'm like trying to identify requirements and the main ideas. And usually, like the first week for me is for exploring the data, but just saying that, oh, okay, let's go look at the data, it's not really productive. So it's always better to have some problem in mind. So you could like look at the data thinking that I can use this for that. So it was useful for me to know about these ideas which were requested in the beginning. So I could like look at data thinking that I could use these for that and etc.
So that's for the first week, you said, and then let's say after a month, what should you do in a month? Like, do you already need to have some sort of POC, or are you still in this exploratory phase? Like, I guess it depends on a case, but yeah, what do you think should happen after a month? Yeah.
Yeah, there was some delay, I think.
Should I repeat?
No, I got it. It just came a bit later.
Uh,
So I think like it kind of depends on the pace of a person. I kind of tend to do a lot of stuff quickly. I don't know. I try to get some kind of PCO the first months. It can be not necessarily a model, but just some kind of a research or insights which already could be used. And so basically, yeah, it could be even like a draft version of the model, even at the same time, because you can kind of try to do that iteratively. So you already can test out some of the hypotheses.
mhm. So basically, at the end of week one, you already have you explore the data, you already know data more or less well. You kind of try to assess if you can use the data that is available to solve the problem that you were hired to solve. And then if it's the case, you explore the data more, and then you get some insights. And then at the end of month number one, you already have some sort of maybe like insights or even a first model, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens after a quarter?
I think by that time you already kind of have some kind of methodology that you use. For example, I didn't just build the first model, I also built some kind of pipelines around that. So it could be easier for me later if I needed to train it or deploy another model. So that's why it probably took me like, it will take me longer at the beginning than later because I already kind of built in some preparations for other work that is going to be done in the future. And probably you should already have some kind of analysis of what you've done. Like, for example, you can at least start running the model, do some kind of A/B testing to know if it's accurate enough, how it's working, because there is a lot based on the feedback and on how your model influences the processes and the product itself. So it's at least in Restream, we kind of follow these lean methodologies. It's why it's kind of really important to do a lot of stuff and iterations and test them at smaller scale.
So basically, in a quarter, after 3 months, you can already test multiple hypotheses, multiple models, and maybe come up with one that really works, and then try to deploy it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and have a A/B test and evaluate it. That's cool. And what if things don't work out well? I think maybe it's a happy path that you do this, you identify the problem, you see that all the data is there, and you get insights, you deploy your model, and then you run A/B test, and you see a huge uplift. But that doesn't always like it. It doesn't have to happen. It might not happen, right? Do you know what's the best way of managing expectations of a company? Like because maybe they want to see results in 3 months, right?
Yeah, I always like say that data science is not a result-oriented field. That I personally believe that any project in data science is basically an answer to some question. Even if we like don't like that answer, it's already some kind of information that we can use later. For example, we know that this model doesn't work, but it doesn't mean like everything is not working completely. We know that, for example, we should solve this problem differently, or we should use another data. We already can draw some kind of conclusions. That's why I kind of always try to maybe educate everyone around that that's how it works. And for example, in Restream right now, my data analysts colleagues, they also agree with that because they have kind of the same mindset when they are working on different problems.
Is it something like this managing expectations? Is it something you should do before starting at the company to make sure that the company knows that this process is not deterministic? You're not guaranteed to have success in 3 months, or like how would you approach that?
I would say that I do that all the time because even if you kind of say that at the interviews and in the beginning, it's still kind of can be hard if it's an IT company which is used to having developers team who just implement some specific tasks, and it's like a deterministic way of doing things. So I usually just kind of always talk about that.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And I think we talked a bit about like that sometimes maybe a dashboard is what the company needs, not a solution, not a machine learning model. So how can we understand if a problem actually requires machine learning, or it can be just simple analytics, like a couple of queries put in a dashboard? Like what's the process of figuring this out?
I would say it's better always to start from something easier. Like I always start from some kind of exploratory data analysis, and I see already if I need a model for that, or I can do it differently somehow. So it's more about not being like focused specifically on just building models, and more on solving problems and how you can do that, and trying to kind of explore and research in the beginning, more rather than just trying to just get all the data again and quickly engineer some features and start training models, because this is not like the main idea. And also, I think iterations kind of help a nice kind of part in terms of data science process, but you kind of trying to at least split the work in some kind of steps and try to look every time if it works or not. For example, I built like many prototypes over time for models because it's kind of easier to see if some features are working. So I wouldn't like spend too much time developing something that's not going to be useful later.
I don't know if you can talk about specific projects, but maybe you have an example where you did something super simple that didn't require machine learning, and then improved and did a few iterations, and then added some machine learning on top of that later.
I would say that thinking about some of the projects I had, I don't remember the projects if I like added machine learning after that, but I could add it in the future if like more data is added here. For example, there is the possibility to communicate different customers in more effective way. So at first, I tried to identify like which of these customers can churn, like which of them risky ones in terms of churn. And at first, it was just an analysis, what can like can be related to that. Then I built a model which helps to identify probability of churning. And after that, I've been like collaborating with marketing department about trying to communicate with them, and probably later we can build a model on top of that to identify what is like the most effective way to communicate, which are like activities can be used to for retention of customers. But like right now it's partially machine learning, partially just analysis, and I'd say it's always kind of done that way, that you try to do something which is easier and faster in the beginning, so you know if it's like even high priority, if it's even needed for this kind of problem. Because sometimes some people can say that something that they need, or like the solution right now, but it sometimes turns out that it's not really that needed.
Okay, I guess when it comes to churn, you can just analyze churn rate in different segments, right? You can look at, I don't know, maybe people for specific type of, I don't know, business, or people from specific countries, and then just by doing group by and looking at the average churn rate, you can already understand what are the segments that are more likely to churn, right? Or does it work like that, or there's?
I'd say that at first was more like trying to understand from the point of a product, like how it usually happens, what influences this process the most. So I had like some kind of event triggers at first, and just information about that, and then the model itself. So yeah, at first it was like more of a basic analysis, what can be related to that.
Okay, and yeah, like I think we already talked about the timeline, right? So for the first project, like you can see, like in 3 months you have a POC, ideally, right? That's
Yeah.
And for the second project, like should it be faster, or like would you expect to have it in the same timeline, or how does it usually work?
I would say it's a boring response, but it depends on the case, because sometimes it can be some project which requires working with the data you didn't work before, or requires some additional work there with pipelines and stuff. But if it's something that can reuse the previous work, then I kind of expect it usually to be faster.
So if it's not a very complex problem and you already know the data set, so each next model should be a bit faster, right?
Yeah, especially if you kind of reuse some of the pipelines, because I usually try to automate a lot of stuff. It's kind of my, I would say, hobby, but I don't know, I like automating a lot of stuff, because it's kind of boring to repeat yourself all the time with like these features and analysis. So it's getting faster with different projects to get them done.
Yeah, we have a question about identifying the best model for a problem. And maybe not just a model. I think it's interesting because we talked that sometimes there is these things can be solved with analytics. So how would you suggest identifying the best solution to a problem?
I would say that you can analyze it both from the perspective of a data scientist, like using specific metrics depending on what kind of case do you have, but it's also maybe even more important to try to understand what you are actually improving and how you can measure that. And something that I'm always kind of focusing on while planning, I always like ask people who like give me this kind of request if they need something to be done, I always ask them like, how are we gonna measure that, and how are we gonna know if it's working or not? And even if they don't know, we can like figure out it together. But it's something that should be done in the beginning, because usually when you just come up with something on the way, you never know if there is like correlation with the results. And so it's better to kind of define it earlier, and then to try to compare your solutions using both data science methods and also your knowledge of domain.
And another question is like, how do you evaluate your performance? I think you kind of answered that. So you can like when you define these KPIs, when you define these metrics, you can already see if your models are working or not, right? And this is a good way of evaluating your performance, right? Like how well you're doing, how well your models are doing.
Yeah, I would say it's a tricky one for data scientists. And in the first startup where I worked, there was like a lot of discussion about KPIs and how it can be calculated. For example, like if number of deployed models or number of trained models can be a KPI, or what is usually like could be helpful. And I personally can't say that I found an answer for myself, but it's more like probably how you deliver the insights. But again, I'm not sure it's related to speed, because people have different pacing when they work. Some people require more time, some people require less. And so it's more like on how you are oriented on what you do and how you try to provide some insights, even if it's not the answer that was kind of expected. And like a failed model is not a fail.
Yeah, right. Because I imagine if your KPI is number of models running in production, then like what if we know that machine learning is not deterministic?
Yeah.
It can happen that just by bad luck, your projects are not successful just because it happens, right? And then it's not that like you're not working well, it's because like stuff happens. And so yeah, maybe a number of experiments that you did could also be a good KPI, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe.
So maybe many of them are failed, but yeah, that's part of learning. And who actually evaluates your performance? Because I imagine if you're the only data scientist in the company, other people might not know how well you're doing your job. So how do they, who evaluates you, and how do they do this? What do they use to understand if you're doing well?
Right now it's like a head of business analytics department, and maybe because he's also like a data analyst, it kind of helps to be on the same wave about that experiments are experiments. And basically he just has like some ideas what can be done and how fast it's usually done. So maybe it's a bit subjective, but I wouldn't say that there is like a specific system of KPIs, but that's how it's done right now.
So having analysts in a company definitely helps, because these are the people who you can talk to on the same language, right? Because they probably understand that they, most of analysts, I think they know that machine learning exists, even maybe they don't have hands-on experience, but they probably have some ideas what it is, right?
Yeah, basically like this colleague of mine suggested to hire data scientists because he saw like problems which couldn't be solved just using data analytics. So yeah, some data analysts try stuff in machine learning or just know how it works in general.
And when you are a lone wolf data scientist, like you're alone in the company and you get stuck, like there is a problem that you cannot solve, like who do you ask for guidance? Like, who do you ask for help in this situation?
I think it depends on kind of what I got stuck in. If it's like something business related, then I can discuss it with my colleagues, depending on for whom I'm like making this kind of project. If it's more data science related, it's usually not intimidating for me. I just try to read more about stuff. I try to communicate with people I know in the field and like go to different events and also discuss it with in communities that I know. So I don't usually feel like it's something like a huge problem for me. Like it could be, it used to be when it was like just the beginning of my career. But right now I don't really feel like it's necessary to have someone by your side because basically as data scientists we all work kind of separately and we don't collaborate that much as maybe software engineers do.
Okay, yeah, so basically you used your network. You go
Yeah.
to meetups and perhaps the community we mentioned at the beginning, women who code, it's also like where you can ask for help, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, another question we have: what are some good ways to communicate the information that you gained through your analysis, deploying your model to the analytics team? Is it better during is it better to do so during research or by running things?
I think it's more like about the format, as I understood, like this question, or more about like when do you stop, like when do you have these iterations and
Like
present something?
how do you do this? Like how do you communicate to the analytics team? Like let's say you run a model and then you want to tell about the results. Like how do you do this?
I usually just create some kind of a report, visualizations, which could be more or less interpretable for them, and even if it's more of my specific metrics stuff, I try to explain it as much as I can, and so it could be like so we could talk on the same wave, and basically it's always better for me to kind of make a report because it kind of also helps me to understand when I'm creating it what I could miss or if I did everything what I was thinking about. So yeah, basically it can be just a team call or one-to-one depending like how many people in the team you have, and in if you're like discussing it with other teams, it helps to kind of have some kind of company-wide discussions or tech talks, something that I had experience with quite quite often, I would say, and it's kind of helpful to educate everyone else in the company as well.
I don't know, do you have some specific format for your reports? Like some template that you use?
Not really. I think I would like to have one probably, but it changes over time and different companies. It like depends when you kind of present to other people because over time you get to know them and you know what's like more insightful for them. So I don't have any like automatic reports. I just do everything in code and try to like present it in with some kind of visualizations.
So usually it contains some visualization, right? So
Yeah.
like this is like the, for example, if we take A/B test, so these are the results with model and these are the without. This is the metric we're measuring and this is the uplift, right? Or there is no uplift and our experiment is bad. Right? So this is the
Yeah.
kind of language you use for communicating the results.
Yeah.
Okay. And, another question is, so is your background is that you were transitioning from software engineering to data science. Do you have any advice for people who want to do the same?
I would say that the most important thing for me was to kind of get used to this non-deterministic mindset. That it's something I got to discuss a lot with other people who try to switch as well to data science from software engineering. And usually a lot of people struggle with that most of all, as well as with probably some mathematical background. And I'd say that trying to read about that more and understand that and try some stuff in practice, that's something that helps. But I also think that it's kind of it's not a problem to be a software developer and not to be a researcher, because especially if you're kind of focused on working on specific problems in the company, not doing some kind of research, but more of a scientific research, then it's going to be more of your strengths, because a lot of stuff is not just about training a model, it's about everything else around it, like the maintenance, deployment, monitoring. So I would say for me, it's really helpful that I have this background, because it helps me to do all this stuff in a more efficient way.
So basically for you is like if you work as a single data, only data science in a company, then it definitely helps to have this background.
Yeah, for sure, because you kind of get to do a lot of stuff from scratch and implement a lot of things in the beginning.
And when it is the right moment to start asking for more data scientists? So let's say you joined a company as as a as one data scientist, and then you did a couple of proof of concepts. Then some of them really worked, and then you now have many projects. Some of them were successful. And how do you understand that now it's time to ask for help? Like to get more data.
Well, yeah, I personally kind of always feel that, I don't know, intuitively, in terms of like the load of projects. I mean, like what's expected, how many projects in the same time are having high priority, and if I can like physically do that all myself. And company-wise, I would say if you deliver value, it's kind of easier to get this kind of suggestion from the company itself that you need to get more resources and to expand. So it's more about kind of your own work and trying to deliver some kind of results, and also about managing expectations and managing the work that you do, and always kind of seeing that in terms of pressure and plans that you have for the future.
Okay, so when you understand that you're falling behind, that many projects, all of them are important and you cannot implement them, maybe even the management will come to you and say, hey, how about getting some help? Right?
Yeah, basically that's what happened like at the first startup where I worked, that at some point there was already like two data scientists except for me. I was like the third one, because there was several like threads which were at the time really important and they needed work, and that's why it kind of although it takes time from me as well to mentor these people, to do some kind of onboarding, but usually this time it usually pays off if you need to have some work done simultaneously, different directions.
And what about stopping a project? So let's say you work on a project, so it looked promising at the beginning. You did a POC, and then after some time you realize that this project is not going anywhere. So like the results aren't great. You spent too much time on that. How do you stop working on this project and perhaps pick a different one?
I think that it always happens, and it helps me to discuss it with my team. If I have like data analysts in my team, I always discuss with them like priorities. What do they think is more important? So basically, when you like always asking yourself if I'm doing the most important stuff right now, and what can be done faster than anything else, then you kind of ready to switch to other things, and regardless of how it could be like more or less interesting to you.
Because like I know, at least for me, when I work on a project, I develop this attachment to this project, even though I know maybe it's not as successful as I wanted this project to be, but still when you put some effort in a project, it's very hard to let it go. So do you have any secret how uh, to overcome that, like, or advice maybe?
I think I just personally don't feel when try to stop the project that I kind of have a lot of regrets. I don't know how it works. I just when I'm like working on the project, I'm usually like very much focused on it. But if I see that it's not working, I'm like just always saying to myself that I will come back to that later if it's going to be working, because like the main idea for me is not to do something like to work on the same project all the time because I just like it, but like the main purpose of my work is to deliver some insights and to do that in an effective way. So basically, that's more about like reminding what you're doing and what's your purpose.
And I also imagine that some projects could be more fun than others. So let's say in one project you use like, I don't know, deep learning model, and then in another it's just simple analysis, and you kind of work. Hello.
Hi. It's good.
Yeah,
It's
I am from
froze.
my phone. Yeah, I hope the stream is still there. Yeah, something is happening with my computer today. I'm sorry for that. I was asking something, but I don't remember. What was that?
Yeah, I didn't hear that,
Okay.
fortunately.
Yeah, I do. My computer now is gone, and I don't have access to the questions I prepared and the questions of listeners. I apologize for that. But I do remember one question that I wanted to ask, and I know that we are actually wrapping up soon. Maybe I can ask that, and we'll see if some other come up. So the question I have is, do you have a list of questions that, let's say, if you want to join a company that doesn't have data scientists yet, do you have a list of questions that you want to ask before joining the company? Like, are there some, I don't know, maybe 5-10 questions that you have to ask before making this decision to join them?
Yeah, I think the first and the most important question for me is asking how does the company sees data scientists and what do they expect from me in the company? How do they imagine what I'm going to be doing in the company? Basically, just hearing the answer says a lot about whether the company is ready for data science and whether they don't just think that it's kind of some kind of a magic thing that's going to solve everything, or how like how mature the company is in this matter. And also, I would say that more of a additional problems is additional questions is like, what kind of problems do you expect me to solve? Because again, that says about how ready the company is, and do they like hire you for a specific problem, or are they just having the feeling and intuition that something can be done, but they are not sure yet. Also, I personally like to ask uh, how do you see like the deadlines? When do you expect the results to be delivered? Because it seems to me that a lot of companies which are not really familiar with data science, they think in terms of the deadlines from software development, and usually it's kind of faster than it is in data science. And again, it says about kind of preparation, and if the company is ready to accept how the process is going to be running with data science. Also, I would say it's important to get to know more about the collaboration between teams, and to ask about that, like if the teams are collaborating together, how often do they build something together, and can one team like work on the task and another continue something? Because basically this is maybe I would say even the essence of what we do as data scientists, because like I can just create some model, but if the results of this model are not used later on by other teams, it doesn't really matter that much, and it won't provide any kind of a result. And it won't be I won't be able to get some like evaluation of what I've been doing, and it won't be visible whether it was actually worth it to hire data scientists for the problem. And maybe also, I personally ask about the future plans of the company, like if they're planning to have a team in the future, to just get to understand what kind of problems do they have, how they like perceive that, and can because I'm personally like interested in expanding stuff, and I'm not just always like coming to the company thinking that I will be working as a only data scientist in there for years, because it's obvious that problems require like more resources. So for me, it's also interesting to hear if how company perceives that, and do they actually see this like as a some kind of potential field for growth, and something to do in there for the company.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned at the beginning was one of the first things is like whether a company is ready for data science. And how do you assess readiness? Is it something that we talked about, like having a data pipeline, having a analysts, or maybe a department with analysts, things like that, right?
Yeah, and then also like hearing how they kind of describe what data scientists do, because it helps to understand whether they already like have some expectations, if they are close to reality or not, and if they are not, whether it's going to be a problem or not.
So how do you ask that? Like, what in your opinion do data scientists do every day? Like, do you just ask like that?
It's more like, how do you imagine my work? What I
Mhm.
will be doing or to solve this kind of problem, or what kind of problem they expect me to solve. So it's more like, I would say, a more vague way of asking that.
Yeah, I see that there is a, I managed to restore my computer and I opened Slido with questions, and I see that there is a question with 4 upvotes. I know we run out of time, but maybe you have a couple of more minutes to
Yeah,
perhaps
okay.
answer that question. Yes, so when would it be best to take a model out of research environment and integrate it into the live product? And what factors are important to think about when doing that?
I would say that it's better at first to test it out if it's possible outside of a product. Like sometimes it's not always implemented inside of the product. Like for example, the churn prediction model that I worked on in Restream, it basically helps one specific team, and it doesn't really influence anything related to the product. So it's like not integrated into it, but sometimes like, for example, I used to work when I worked in a fintech startup, there was a lot of work related to anti-fraud, to credit scoring, and it was like one of the key components of clients evaluation. So before just integrating all that and running all the clients through this new way of evaluating them, the thing that I did was kind of A/B testing. I was just running it in the silent mode and getting some kind of responses of a model and trying to evaluate that, instead of like just turning it all on and seeing how it works, because it's kind of a risky thing to do, I would say.
And
And if you like have this kind of first results, you already get to know if it's worth it to try to run it in like fully in production inside your product. But still, even if you like get to run it, I wouldn't say that it's good to turn it like on for all of the clients. It is better to do it kind of in a A/B testing manner.
okay, thank you. Maybe do you have any last words before we finish today?
I would say like something that is the most important for me personally when I start introducing data science in companies is about not being intimidated by challenges, and be able to kind of learn fast, and be ready that you sometimes have to do a lot of work yourself and also educate people around you. But probably sometimes that's the fun, and for me at least it is.
Yeah, thanks. How can people find you?
You can find me on, I think, LinkedIn. I'm not really active on Twitter, but also I'm on Facebook as well.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your experience. I apologize for all the technical difficulties first with sound,
that
then with
happens.
my computer. Yeah, happens in one stream, of course, when I go live. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today, for asking questions. And
Thanks.
yeah, have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.